As I see it, class warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom? It's worth it. How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto Willis. Welcome to Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willis, your host. Good morning, and good morning, Harris County. Good morning to the great state of Texas. Good morning to the United States of America. And of course, good morning to the world receiving our signals via the magic of El Internet, formerly known as the ARPANET, created by We the People. We the People. You know, folks, indoctrination is a bad thing. I repeat, indoctrination is a bad thing. The problem about it is many of those being indoctrinated, including yours truly. Let me just tell you, yours truly, everybody at some point in our society has had to be or has been indoctrinated on something. We'll get into that a bit further, but without further ado, let's pass it on to the studio with our geniuses or resident geniuses, which are El Senor Howard Reynolds and Jacques Van Beba.
You mean the indoctrination of the Republican Party is saving the world? I think we have lots and lots of evidence that they're not saving the world. They're not even saving the United States.
They're filling their
Very
pockets.
true. Very
Those
true.
bums. Well, good morning, Egberto. It is Monday morning at the radio, the 15th of December, and we have a great show for you today. And Jack, go ahead and do your stuff.
Good morning, Egberto. How are you?
Talk to me, my brother. Talk to me.
All right. This program confronts three uncomfortable truths that define the current political movement. Honest dialogue across ideological divides remains possible but difficult. Corporate power continues to distort public policy even when human lives hang in the balance. And Democrats cannot defeat authoritarian policies without confronting it inside their own ranks. From a revealing coffee with a MAGA listener to the grotesque profiteering behind the so-called miracle drug to Houston Democrats finally holding Mayor John Whitmire accountable, this show argues that democracy survives only when progressives stop ceding moral ground. Right on.
Yes.
Yeah, you better
Yes.
stop that. That seeding stuff is no good.
Yeah,
No, it's
yeah.
not.
I was going through the news headlines today, and there were three articles on. The first one from Our Changing Climate is how capitalism turns catastrophe into profit. Then the Washington Post headline was a reckoning over capitalism. And then another, Our Changing Climate, why capitalism is killing us. So
Wow.
the world
Great
is waking up.
articles. Let me
Yeah,
tell yeah, and they need to wake up. But beforehand, I'm going to surprise you guys. We remember I've been telling you guys all week that we were going to have this coffee with Egberto with a very progressive guy that gives me a very hard time in the chat. I love this dude. He gives me a hard every time I say something. He'll be, so why did you vote Democrat? Because but this is a great guy, and we sit down and talk. Well, we talk on the chat, but this is the second time that he went ahead and got a coffee with Egberto contribution to the show, to the station. So we went out on Sunday, and he also said, "Hey, we should invite Brian." And believe it or not, Brian, everybody who's listening to the program knows who Brian is. The one of the people who antagonizes this program the most, usually the most disrespectful to me for obvious reasons, often. And he showed up. What do you think the impression is? Let me ask Howard. Howard, are you still there?
I'm here.
Yeah. So
My
here
the
it is.
impression. What?
Yes.
I can hardly wait to hear this one.
Yeah, I figured you would say you could hardly wait. Believe it or not, let me just say, uh, uh, Glenn was the first one in the house. We met at a coffee shop we should not have met at because supposedly I'm boycotting it, but it was in the central area that we met before. I'll just say we met at Starbucks, and I've been boycotting Starbucks again for several issues. But so we got there, and Glenn got there first. And when I got there, I looked around and make sure everything was okay. Walked into Starbucks, and
No guns, huh?
right, walked into Starbucks,
Okay.
and um, Glenn was there, and we started talking, and then this this guy with a coat and a briefcase and a lot of paperwork coming out. Well, I could see some paperwork sticking out of the briefcase, and we immediately assumed that was Brand because we don't know him. He came in, and he came in stern face, very stern face, and almost like ready for battle, right?
Hmm.
And I said, "Hey, how you doing?" I extended my hand. Glenn extended the hand, and we met, Brian. And myself. I'm always looking for good civil conversation, and no, I don't want any animosity with it. And so I cleared the way. By the way, you're so Latino. I always give a good hug or whatever, but at the same time, I refuse to infringe in anybody's space. I said, you know, now as opposed to assuming, I always say, "Hey, hug" or something like that when we're going to do it. And he gave the stern look at like, "I don't do that." I said, "Okay, no problem." And we sat down and we introduced ourselves and we asked each other about you know what he does, and he explained who he was. At first, the discussion you could see that he was very uncomfortable, but as we warmed things up, it was clear that even he, though he would have continued being given some sort of antagonism, I think we were getting someplace, and he was feeling more comfortable. In fact, so much so that we went ahead and got to a table where we could be in closer proximity. And uh, then Glenn asked, "Can we record what we're talking about?" And he said, "Okay." So I did record some of it, but I didn't feel good flying it in general. What I want to do is take some outtakes and let folks see specific points that I want to make sure of that I'll do another day. But suffice it to say that the conversation went well. Brian was Brian, and but a much tamer form by the end. Near the end of the discussion, I think he got sort of perturbed that there was an answer for every fallacy that he believed in. And I think eventually he just couldn't take that and said, "Okay, I've got to go." And he walked out. I watched him get into his thing and said, "So long." But let me just say this. The ultimate thing about all of this, I started the show about indoctrination. Hey, Glenn, how you doing, buddy? I see Glenn is in the chat as well. We started about indoctrination. And the one thing, we're going to meet again. Glenn said he wanted to meet the trio again. The one thing about indoctrination, especially in the form of that I saw with Brian, is it is sad because of how it actually impacts one's life. Um, he, my, br- let me see how to say this. Whereas Glenn and I, even living under Trump's world, express a joy for the future, a joy from we are going to make things better. We are going to be a part of the solution. We saw none of that in Brand. We saw that sort of a desperation for wanting things to be bad and not accepting responsibilities for things we had done, things we are likely to do, etc. And as a good example, one of his pet peeves was the reason he disliked. First of all, he came straight out and said, "I don't like you because you're an immigrant. He told me that directly. He said, I don't like you because you're an immigrant. Albeit, and by the way, nothing that I'm saying here is something that Brian would not like me to reveal. He gave no, as usual, I want folks to understand that if they're working with me or if we're talking or having a conversation, you can tell me what I'm telling you is in confidence, or I don't mind if you use this on the program, etc. And Brian said there were no, I I asked that, and he said, oh, no, you can say that on the program. I know you're going to say this on the program. You can say this on the program. So there's no confidentiality or anything like this that is going awry. I make sure of that. And I come out and I say this because whenever I speak to people, I want folks to understand that if there are things that you want to say that I don't want this is how I feel, but I don't want others to know, or I don't necessarily want that to be blasted, I can understand that as well. But going back to his MAGA face, and by the way, at one time we took a picture together. I'll put that up some other time, and he actually had his MAGA hat on, which I found kind of amusing. But and the people in the in the Starbucks were pretty pissed. I can say that, just like some of our audience here with emails that I got was pretty pissed that I was going to meet with this guy. But again, I believe in conversation and I believe in eternal conversation to to move things right. But there was this woman that she kept on looking at me. It's like, why the hell? Her look was, why the hell are you doing this? Because there were certain things that he said that were pretty darn obnoxious. But here is the thing: that, believe it or not, the obnoxious things weren't the one that got to me. The one that really got to me was when I spoke earlier about indoctrination. Was the following: two things actually. He was so sure of himself, but unfortunately, his sureness was him being wrong. Let me give one good example. He thought he was going to show us how bad our tax system was by bringing a sheet from the IRS that identifies the different tax rates. Okay? Uh, I will. That identify the tax rates. But here's the thing: what Brian didn't understand was that there is this stuff called adjusted gross income, which is what you really pay your tax on. Your tax isn't paid on income; it's paid on adjusted gross income. And those who have political power have ensured that many things go to offset your adjusted gross income, such that you can make a lot of money and don't pay a lot of taxes, and you can make a little bit of money and pay a lot of taxes based on your income. And Brian falls into the domain that he pays income on most of what he makes. So the type of policies passed by the United States government under Trump is the ones that harm him. And he comes with a sheet of paper that pretty much allowed us to make the case like, you're being harmed by this tax rate proposed by the guy that you love. But he couldn't see it because he went under the assumption that all these deductions, etc., only applied to corporations and that adjusted gross income didn't quite apply to individuals. A complete misunderstanding of how things work. Another was capitalism. He hated both Brian and myself, Glenn and myself, for the way we speak about capitalism and the extractive nature of capitalism. Okay, and we identified it, and he said he pointed out that communism and socialism kills, and capitalism has killed absolutely nobody. But he was completely unaware of where the term banana republic came from. He was completely unaware of what occurs in Africa to mine the minerals for what capitalism needs for sustenance. I mean, the indoctrination and the ignorance of things was amazing. And it's hard to have a conversation when one is has chosen, I'm not saying cannot critically think. One has chosen not to critically think. it is imperative that one has the ability to critically think so one can change. When I was a sexist, when I was a homophobe, had I not had the ability to critically think when my ways were set straight by good people who sat me down and slapped senses into me. I had to be educated and I had to have the ability to think critically so that that education that others gave me could hold. And that's what I did. When I speak to Glenn and I have disagreements on the Democratic Party and how to move forward. We sit down and analyze the pros and cons of what actually gets done from a party standpoint, from a logistic standpoint, from an activist standpoint. And we don't necessarily leave in agreement, but we at least leave with a valid position, which is what we try to do. Glenn wants me to talk about the Bill Maher was a good idea, pointing out how Bill Maher was now on Trump's side, not realizing that Bill Maher was making a calculated decision to jump on the Trump bandwagon because it was good for his show. Again, being sold out by indoctrination. But the thing that got me the most was where I told him about this enslaved mentality. And he works for a company and he was happy. He thought it was great that the boss gave him money and the bonus at the end of the year. And that made him very, very happy. And he said because of his boss, he was able to pay his bills. True. Yeah, you were employed and being able to pay his bill. But what he was unaware of or unable to comprehend is that absent his work and the work for his team that lays that concrete down, that boss made zero money. That boss, the capitalist boss who made money on his back, would have been unable to profit. So that boss giving him a bonus at the end of the year because the company did well failed to realize that the company did well because of all those workers and the bonus they got. If it wasn't commensurate with, let's say, the profit that company made, it's peanuts because, again, all the profit was based on what work he did. And our indoctrination into believing that thank you, rich people, for giving me a job, thank you, rich people, for having the capital for a job, is an enslaved mentality, not realizing that absent your work, that person who had the ability to give you back some of the money that you earned for them is an enslaved mentality. Because absent your work, absent your worth, they don't make any money. So they are just giving you back a piece of what you have earned. And he could understand the concept that his boss's worth was no more than his own personal worth. He couldn't understand that. And that goes right back into the thing about how worth is established. Because tying into that, when Glenn brought up the fact that, yes, the people with capital are the ones who are able to do things, right? But again, how did they get their capital in the first place? And when you break it down, when you break America down from its inception, that capital was attained in not the most glorious ways. It was attained through conquest, killing, murder, slavery, all of that. Yes, that's in the past, but that was the genesis of most of the capitalists who have a lot of capital. You say, well, Bill Gates made it on his own. No, he didn't. Look at his lineage. There are very few people that have ever made capital on just without having had capital or having been chosen by somebody who has capital to build you up. So I enjoyed the conversation. Glenn enjoyed the conversation, and I think I left I left Brian with a message, and I said, I know. I mean, there is somewhere in that mind that there's a lot of knowledge that we put out there, Glenn and myself. There is much that I know, even as he was resistant to hear information. It wasn't. Do you like says you had coffee with a brick wall? Um, well, believe it or not, there are certain things that he eventually conceded on. But it wasn't. I wasn't trying. When I have these conversations, I am not trying to do this. Do you lie? I'm not trying to say we speak to somebody and they leave the discussion with say, I've seen the light. I've seen the light, and I understand that is not what I want, because that is not long lasting. That is never long lasting. What's long lasting is when you plant the seeds of knowledge, even for somebody that may think they're not absorbing that seed of knowledge. But later on, something it happens to them. The boss tells them something that I get that done right or whatever, and at some point he may realize, wait a minute, he doesn't know how to do this. I am the one who knows how to do this, but he's the one calling the shots. He's the one with the capital. Eventually something triggers one into saying, oh my God, I am the one with the knowledge, not him. I always talk about putting the capitalist on an island with the farmer and see who survives. Separate the island in two, put the capitalist on one side of the island, put the farmer on the other side of the island. The farmer knows how to grow the crop, turn it into food. The capitalist always had somebody doing something for him because he had capital, and in a capitalist society, that's what matters, right? That is what matters. So here is the thing. What we do as a program, what we do as activists, is to try to trigger those things to show how wrong our system is. I mean, the people that revere these billionaires, I revere not one of them. And I don't care if we're talking the one we consider a relatively benevolent billionaire like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett or others. I revere none of them, because their wealth is none of their wealth is based on their worth to society. None of it. None of all the when Buffett invests in trains, when Buffett invests in trains, or Buffett invest in all, he is investing on the work and labor of others and taking a piece of the action. He's not doing anything wrong. It's our current economic system. But do not dare believe that these guys are indispensable, because they're not. You, the people that are listening to me right now, are the ones that are indispensable. All of you engineers out there, all of you garbage collectors out there, all of you secretaries out there, all of you street sweepers are out there. You are the indispensable ones, not the people at the top that are billionaires. They are, in fact, the parasites. But it's when we have been indoctrinated into a system that diminish our worth as what we provide to society, it is so then easy for these guys to think they have more worth than they do. And that is why the indoctrination, that's why you get the Powell memo that says we have to infiltrate the churches, the universities, the media, to continue this barrage of information, to have you believe, to keep you off balance, to make you believe that your worth isn't what it is. And I am here to tell you, once you free your mind, once you unenslave your mind about who actually has maximal worth, it is clear then that it is you. And that you is all of you. That's what Glenn, we both could see. Uh, Glenn said we both could see he wants to engage on some level, and deep down, he is receiving what we're saying. He did get upset, but when you challenge someone's world with view with substantive arguments, they get uncomfortable, and that is true. I mean, I got uncomfortable when I was challenged, but the difference is how do you handle that discomfort? You know, when there are certain people that when you talk about certain issues, the discomfort is so great that they just tune out of it. Our thing, our thing is to try to get the discomfort level to keep you tuned in, as even you have a certain level of discomfort. Uh, again, yeah, Steve, none of these billionaires are the genesis of their creation. None. And I've gone through all of them. None of these billionaires are the genesis of their creation. Please remember that. Come on in, Tag.
Good morning, Alberto. How you doing?
Good morning, my brother. Talk to me.
Well, first I got to congratulate Howard for getting the bugs worked out of the system.
Yes.
It seems much
Thank
better
you,
now.
Howard.
Yeah, kudos to Howard. So, it's been um, um, my belief that a lot of these MAGA people before 2016-15, they really didn't know anything about politics.
Right.
You understand? You believe that?
That's a statement of fact.
And
MAGA is a response to two things. MAGA is a response to, first of all, prejudice. Number one, it's an outbreak of the Tea Party, and what Donald Trump was very good at doing is turning it into a marketing scenario. But continue. But yes, you're absolutely correct.
well, the thing is those of us on the other side of the aisle, I think we've been vested in politics for an awfully long time, and those new Johnny Come Latelys, MAGA Johnny Come Latelys, they don't understand that we've been watching all this stuff happening for sometimes 20, 30, 40 years.
Right.
And I think back to, was it Gary Trudeau that used to write the comic strip that featured Trump once in a while?
Right. I do.
I think it was. Yeah, yeah, and so those of us who remember what Trudeau had to say about Trump, still we still remember that, and it still holds true today. And that's why, and some of us, we watched 14 years of The Apprentice, just because it was kind of a comedy show almost. And
Yeah.
and these people just don't understand that it's like them talking to their grandparents. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As far as politically.
Well,
And
I mean,
I feel kind of bad for them.
yeah. The thing about it is how. Let me just say this to interrupt you a bit. The thing about it, and I, we told him this to his face, because that's how we are. I told Brian a lot of things to his face. I told Brian specifically, look, um, you know, I can tell you that towards my show, because it's me, you have been racist, you have been, and I gave him the reasons why, and pointed out that many of our listeners are very upset with me because they know how and again, I told him all this to his face, right? They know how he has been and how he works with other shows that he called, right? The disrespect that he has actually showed for this show. I have no problem. Like I said, I'm very frank when we're speaking, respectful, civil, but frank. The problem here is this: a lot of these guys know so little. They only know what Fox News has told them, with no context, with no background information, with absolutely nothing. And when you hear somebody say, "Well, I don't know that, I'm going to have to look it up." Well, how the hell can you come out and say certain things if you don't have the full story and you don't know, but you're so pompous in the way you think you know something is. Glenn wanted me. I'm coming back to you in a minute, but Glenn wanted to bring up that he didn't quite understand how the formation of America with the colonists and the settlers, etc. It was amazing, and when he finally realized certain things, he couldn't admit that yes, we came here and we took land. Eventually, he started to bring things up like Genghis Khan and all. It was, but again, these things were known. But continue, brother.
Well, I like to explain to these MAGA people who I know are Johnny Come Latelys, and that when I was a kid back in the 50s, early 60s, well, both Patty and I, we came from families who had newspapers in small towns, to kind of give you an idea. So we were kind of plugged into the news even back in the 50s and 60s. And I remember sitting around my grandparents' supper table with my aunts and my grandpa coming up from working on the newspaper and talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis in the Bay of Pigs. And I mean, that's how far back my memory goes with politics. And, I remember sitting in school the day that Kennedy was shot. And it was just like, these people have no concept about what's happened in our country and what's led up to this whole MAGA invasion that we're. it's a flash in the pan.
Yeah, but let me add to that though, because it's important. Because I want to point out that do you lie thinks, well, you're talking to a brick wall. We better hope that in the aggregate, not necessarily for one person, but we better hope that in the aggregate we're not speaking to a brick wall. Because if in the aggregate we're speaking to a brick wall and that cancer continues to grow, that's a demise for the country. And so many of us, many of if let's say if you were many of us that try to continue to engage, we do so because we realize that if we let this thing go too far without coming back, that it's a detriment to the country. But Tag, I got to let you go because I got Coach Cam on, and Coach Cam has a very important story to tell us about what occurred yesterday at the
News and weather with Jack, right?
We don't do that on the early morning show. Not on the early morning show. Thank you, brother. You have a good day.
Have a good day.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, brother. Let's go to Coach Cam. Coach, how you doing?
Verso, good morning. Top of the morning to you.
Yeah, let me just first introduce you. Coach Cam is a precinct chair in the Harris County Democratic Party, an activist as well. And Coach Cam was a leader or one of the organizers of executing a very important feat yesterday at the CEC meeting. Coach, I wanted to actually get you on camera there, but I had to bail out of there because I had other commitments. But thank you for calling in. Tell us what happened yesterday at the Houston Democratic Party County Executive Committee meeting.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a build-up over 8 or 9 months, but last night, overwhelmingly, a vote of 186 to 80, we aligned as a party. We decided to come together as a party and send Mayor Whitmire a very clear message that he will not be able to seek our endorsement for the upcoming race or any races that he may seek moving forward.
And tell us why it is that you organized that movement. What was his, como se dice, delito? What was his crime, if you will?
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to address that. And by way, I've heard a few talking points or critiques I think it makes sense to address as well. We gave this speech yesterday, and you have 2 minutes to make your points, and you're kind of, rambling in the mouth, and you really can't sit and unpack some of these points. The first thing I'll say is, again, as a coach, you never want to kick anybody off your team, right? Like every player you have on your team, you have them there because you think they're an asset and they're going to make you better. So, to have a person on the team that's the mayor, you definitely want that person on your team, right? So I'm saying that to say the actions that the mayor took were so egregious that it was clear that the team would be better removing that person from the team and uniting and working without that person. So there's folks who disagree on the mayor's policies, on the mayor's ideology, that disagree with the rainbows being torn up and some of the stuff with the streets, with the budget. My goodness, a lot of folks disagree with the cooperation with HPD with ICE. Those are things that obviously a lot of us really, really disagree with. But what made it untenable for him to remain on the team was he betrayed the team. There's really only one thing you can do. There's a whole bunch, people talk about what's a good Democrat, what's a bad Democrat. It's really hard to pin down the definition of a good Democrat, right? But it's very easy to pin down the definition of a bad Democrat. A bad Democrat takes actions to undermine and weaken the party. And at the top of the year, Mayor Whitmire hosted and fundraised for Republican congressional elected in Congressional 2, Dan Crenshaw. And that itself became a non-starter and a disqualifier. So that was the basis of this action.
Now, it's amazing because some people just said, oh, he has to work with Dan Crenshaw. That is ridiculous. Dan Crenshaw is not a friend of the middle class. Dan Crenshaw is not a friend of the poor. If you take a look at the policies that he supports, including his affiliation with MAGA has done, any politician who associates with self, albeit and especially with funding, I can't tell you how proud one has to be that this vote wasn't even close as far as saying you are not one of us. This vote was not close, but I think it was a vote that's necessary because I wrote an article last night, and I mentioned your name as being one of the leaders that actually got something done. Because too often, Cam, one allows too often one allows what I call posers to that don't have your interest just because they have a label on them to simply support them. And what you guys said was hell no. And you didn't say hell no by a little. 70% of the precinct chairs, 70% of the precinct chairs says we have no use for you. And that was a great job that you did.
I appreciate that so much, and I think that while we're speaking of this was a team win, and I appreciate the fact that you continue to say we, right? Because this was a ton of activists, a ton of precinct chairs, and folks working their tails off to the bone. Not a single dollar was raised or earned or put out. This wasn't paid support, paid staff, as much as heavy of a lift as it was. Some resources, I'm sure, would have been appreciated and needed for the amount of work that folks put in. This was $0, 0 pennies up against a $10 million war chest. So this actually was a grassroots, grass tops movement versus money.
What I liked as well is like I spoke to a few people who signed the letter supporting the mayor, and above and beyond showing my disappointment with them, and many of these are friends. Above and beyond showing the disappointment, I did, however, there are a lot of good people that had their name on that list. It shows you how the only way to break the machine is doing it at the grassroots, the way you did it. I saw some of the major leaders. They made sure to keep their names off. Like I said, I understand the political pressure that many were under, but again, you showed that grassroots movement works. But more importantly, before March primaries in Texas, all of those who don't follow the values, the orthodoxy that that believe in people, the orthodoxy that goes ahead and say people first, they need to be out before those primaries in order to ensure the primaries elect people of values. Thank you very much, Coach. And give me a last word before we move on.
Yeah, in closing, I'd say people have enjoyed dancing on the graves of Democrats all year. The brand is in the tank. People don't know what we stand for. That may be true in other places. I can't speak on that. I live in Texas. I live in Harris County. I can speak on the Democratic Party being well and alive here. We're fired up. We just had a fantastic win over the weekend at City Council, and we've got about 90 days until we begin to kick tail again. So these primaries are here, guys. Primaries are all about competition. It's a friendly pregame match before the championship in November. So for those who are risk averse and afraid of competing, roll your sleeves up because we've got to get a little better so we can go win in November.
Thank you very much for your good work, Coach. And you keep it up, and you have the support of a hell of a lot of people. All right, brother?
Hey, team effort, guys. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, let's go to Sister Betty. Come on in, Betty. How you doing this morning?
Hi, Brother Alberto. There is no excuse for Trump's outhouse ways. For whites only. On Juneteenth, MLK days, we pay. His birthday, no pay. He will not take the black out of me. My first baby love was Amos and Andy's show. Andy was always saying, shoot one across the bow. And holy mackerel, Andy. In the blacks I work with, my black neighbors for 15 years, me and my husband and my mother-in-law, only whites. They loved us, helped us, protect us. We three did the same. I don't forget the blacks who work for us in our business. Right now, Mr. Bell does my yard for 4 years back, and my president and family man, Barack. Blacks will always be in my life until I die, maybe after. No, Trump, you do not take the blacks out of us just because you say so. Love y'all.
Love you, Betty. Have a great one, sis. Let's go to Brother Jimmy, line 1.
This morning you were talking about the millionaires and billionaires. I believe you call them parasites. And I'm bringing up the idea of entrepreneurs that start a business. There's no business. The entrepreneur comes along with his ideas and puts them together and maybe opens a restaurant or opens a car dealership or whatever, and hires 50 people, 100 people, and so forth, and trains them to do the job so that the business will be successful. And I think that these entrepreneurs that start businesses do every nickel or dollar or $1 million that they make, because without them there would be no jobs. There would be nothing for those people to get to work. He's giving them jobs. He's giving them an income. And, of course, they're helping to make their business successful, too. But he is the entrepreneur who started the business. I think he's worth every dollar that he makes.
Okay, let me give you a corollary to that now, my brother. I gave an interesting point. First of all, I am an entrepreneur. Egberto Willis is an entrepreneur. I made it on my own. The products that I built my home, bought my cars. It's excellent. I indirectly through I hired people, but the one thing I never did was abuse people. Please understand that the person who owns a restaurant that pays his employees a living wage, I love that. I believe in that. But heard what I just said. Pays his employee a living wage. In other words, he's making money because he's the entrepreneur who keeps things together. But the people who actually allows him to make the money also get a living wage. I am not talking about that kind of a person, brother Jimmy. I am talking about the corporation based on stock holding, etc. People that do absolutely nothing, that sits back and make the money off of the worth of other people. That is Jimmy, the definition of a parasite. That I mean, it's not that part isn't really up for debate, right? In other words, if I invest in a company, I sit down at my pool. That's the economic system. I'm not saying it isn't, and it's legal. But if I'm sitting down at my pool as others are doing the work, and all I did was give my capital for that, and those people themselves are not making a living wage for the work they're doing, that makes me a parasite. I am sucking the holy blood out of the worker. And the idea that there would be no work, it's a symbiotic relationship. The entrepreneur cannot make a profit without the worker, and the worker will not have a job if there wasn't the entrepreneur. Who gave the entrepreneur the supreme side of the equation? Every equation has to balance. Anybody who follows geometry, that follows building out equations in algebra, the equation has to balance. And the way we balance our equation today is one that harms the worker. And I am not saying this. Reality is saying that the reason our current economic system moves money to the select few, not to the many, to the select few. That's how the system was designed, Jimmy. And earlier, if you mentioned my conversation with Brian, I spoke about how we are indoctrinated into thinking this is the only way things should work. Entrepreneurs are not the buy all. Entrepreneurs are not. I was an entrepreneur, but I did things right. A lot of the corporations do it wrong. Quick response, Jimmy. I got to go. The phones are full. Go ahead, Jimmy.
I'm just saying quickly that without the entrepreneur, there would be no business. They are the key person. They are deserving of every dollar they can make, as long as they're paying their workers a fair wage.
But that's not what happens, Jimmy.
Without business,
Jimmy, that's not what happens. If you take a look at the transfer of wealth, a CEO making 200 times the workers, he didn't do anything to deserve that. Did he do anything to deserve that?
yeah, he just started the business. Without him, there would be no business.
And without the worker, there would be no business, right?
Well, there's always workers that lurk.
No, again, but Jimmy, without the worker, there is no business. To say that there will always be a worker, what happens when we strike, right? So no, I mean, let's talk about this another time. Let's talk another time on this one, brother. Thank you. Let's go to Gil.
Okay.
Come on in, Gil.
Well, good morning, y'all. I have an academic question about the power of Congress. However, listen to your previous caller just now. I kind of had the same reference in terms of an entrepreneur. He takes a risk getting that loan to start a business. So that is risky, because if it fails, he's stuck with that loan. So that's
Not true. Not true. Let me correct that, though. No, let me correct that economically, because I was going to make that argument with the drug manufacturers. You see, the thing about it is entrepreneurs know something about how the tax system works, right? And since an entrepreneur may risk something, but he'll get it all back through provisions later on. And that's the thing that many people just don't understand. No, the entrepreneur doesn't take losses. I know the entrepreneurs at the low end do that. The mom and pops do that. And I have no problems with the way mom and pops operate in the aggregate. But no, when you talk about the major entrepreneurs, no, they do not take losses in the aggregate. I don't have enough time to go over that, but give me your actual point you want to talk about, Brother Gil.
Thank you for that info. My academic question is this: does Congress have the constitutional power to impeach a Supreme Court justice and or a cabinet member of the administration?
Actually, the Senate can, yes, they can impeach a judge. A Supreme Court judge can be impeached, and the president can be impeached. Yes.
I'll be damned. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I guess we're lacking leadership in Congress, I guess.
There you go. I mean, that's a big problem. I'm out of time, Gil. Let's talk tomorrow. I'll have more time tomorrow, but I have 4 more calls to take. Okay?
Take care. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, brother. All right, let's go to Bobby real quick. Bobby, come on in.
Hi, good morning, Roberto.
Good morning, brother.
Yeah, I was just I watched another video on I mentioned before about China's gold corridor, and what they were saying. I'll try to make this quick. I'm not an economist, but they were saying that basically when Russia invaded Ukraine and we seized the three or however many hundreds of billions of dollars from Russia, that the other countries that might be our adversaries that still had like their stake in American bonds and stuff were pulling out because they're like, oh, if, it's not really your money, it's their money if you hold it with them, because if they don't like what you're doing, they can seize it. So what they were saying was China trying to attack us through our national debt. They're saying our national debt's at like $30 trillion and that every year we have to pay like 1 point something trillion. So, basically the thing is like other countries are looking at us like, we can't even keep our own country open, fiscally. We have to shut our country down. We have $30 trillion in debt. And so what they're doing is they've bought up so much gold that, and they're dumping their U.S. bonds, which, devalues their worth, which only give you like 3% maybe interest, when gold is like doubling in the last 2 years. So they're devaluing our bonds and selling them off. So what happens is there's a term for it called quantitative easing, where the U.S. government's like, ooh, everybody's selling off our bonds. They print up more money to buy some of those bonds back to make them still look stable, but that devalues our currency. And they're saying that's why gold now is at 4,200 when just 2 years ago it was 1,800. It's not because the gold's more valuable. It's because they're devaluing our money. And then eventually they're saying that we will have to offer better bonds with better interest rates to compete with them, making the bonds that are in our 401ks now almost like worthless. So eventually it'll
Actually, let me just tell you that in the aggregate, you're right about that. What's happening, and you're right about the power that China has. You're right about. Let me just give you some monetary groups that are forming, like BRICS, BRICS. BRICS is forming. They have an aggregate
exactly.
Right. They have an aggregate GDP greater. The GNP of the BRICS is larger than that of the seven. I forgot what you call the
right. And
Western.
The BRICS countries are allowing you to trade their money in now for actual physical gold, which we can't do. So,
but we are not advertising. Bobby, I got to
Okay.
cut you, but let me just, because we got to go to other call. But let me just tell you this: you're right on the numbers you're talking about. You're also what we are also being kept in the black. I mean, not knowing what's really going on, as if we have more power than we really do. The economic system can be rejiggled. Let me just say, it can be rejiggled. You can restart the economic system, all of that, but we're screwed, to put it bluntly. I gotta go, Bobby. Tomorrow, let's talk a little bit more. Thank you. Let's go, Patrick. I don't have a lot of time, but come on in, brother Patrick.
Yeah, I can hear it in the tone of your voice. I just wanted to address Jimmy. Jimmy's got kind of a romantic outlook on the relationship for what investors are.
Right.
What I'd like to point out is that a lot of entrepreneurs now are being taken advantage of by venture capitalists. The whitewash is angel investor. What they do is they bet on about 10 entrepreneurs, expecting 9 of them to fail, and then the one that doesn't fail, they rob them blind.
Exactly. I mean, again, Jimmy's a very good guy. Jimmy's a good friend of mine. But again, the romanticization is true. And when I talk about indoctrination, at some point we were all made to believe that this is a system and that somehow it was benevolent. Never was. Got to go, Patrick, Johnny, and then Augie. Johnny, hold it down to like 20, 30 seconds for me, Johnny.
I'll try. I'm really disappointed. With all due respect to Jimmy Dunn, to dovetail with what the previous caller just said, the idea that entrepreneurs or business people are successful because they are geniuses and they have to train people, this is based on the fact that they fail to recognize or admit that the socialization process supplies dumped down people who are not competent enough to be entrepreneurs themselves. They are produced and ready workers for them. What if we empowered people from grade school on? What if we did that, Jimmy Dunn?
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for that. I'm gonna cut you there, but I want to say, I gotta. I know Jimmy. Jimmy's my 90-year-old brother, and look, I love me some Jimmy. A lot of these things have been ingrained in our psyche for a very long time. Let's go to Augie.
Good morning.
Augie, how you doing, brother? Give me 30 seconds.
Oh, fine. Okay. Well, I talked about a friend of mine a long time ago who worked in the labs at a refinery, and he got paid $4,000 for his jobs, and that's a lot of money. But the guy that hired him got paid $15,000 for not doing any work, but for calling him up to do the work.
Right.
And we were indoctrinated in the 50s and 60s about how great the white Americans are, but without telling us about the Pilgrims. They thought that they were good in Thanksgiving. No, Pilgrims were not that good. We talked about Texas Independence Day. It wasn't independence. It was secession from Mexico and slavery. But anyway, thanks for all you do.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Augie. Appreciate you. All right, let me throw it to the studio before we close this baby down.
Oh, don't have anything here. Just a very lively conversation as always. Jack, you got something? Jack says no, so take it home, Egberto.
Thank you very much. Hey, guys, I appreciate you. I got 30 seconds to tell you guys something. There was a story on 60 Minutes about a drug that cost $2.1 million per dose. And let me just tell you, that drug was actually developed by the public sector, meaning your tax dollars. It was also developed by a lot of money that charities gave them. And when it was time to capitalize the money, it went to the company. Jimmy, I want you to understand this is what we are living through. I had it scheduled for talking today. I'll talk about it tomorrow because we need to talk about this issue to try to inform us about what's really going on. Hey guys, love all of you, and I mean all of you. This is how we get things done. We talk with each other. You can get the rest of the story at politicsdoneright.com/newsletter, politicsdoneright.com/newsletter. You can email me directly at kpft@politicsdoneright.com, kpft@politicsdoneright.com. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right, and you guys know how I end this baby. I am what? Out!
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government buy-in for the people. The Trump administration announced a list of 37 corporate and wealthy donors for the White House Ballroom project just days after beginning the East Wing's demolition. Over $350 million has been raised for the $300 million project, according to President Trump, and it raises questions of special interests currying favor with the administration. Cryptocurrency donors, including Coinbase and Ripple, contributed to this and Trump's inaugural fund. Trump told a crypto convention in July, from now on, rules will be written by people who love your industry, not hate your industry. Tech companies contributed, including Apple, Meta, Microsoft, and Google, and